The moment Charles Westfield saw the message on his wife's unlocked phone, his world collapsed like a house of cards. 13 years of marriage, a $4.2 billion empire built from scratch, countless charity galas and business trips, all suddenly in question. A seemingly simple text from a man named James. Can't wait for Friday at the beach house. Already packed my swim shorts. Need anything from the city before I drive down? The beach house, their $18 million sanctuary on the coast, the place Charles had proposed, the place where they'd weathered countless storms together. Now it would become the stage for the most calculated confrontation of his life. Some men might have raged, some might have immediately filed for divorce, but Charles Westfield hadn't become one of the country's most feared corporate raiders by acting on impulse. No, revenge like business was best served with meticulous planning and ice-cold precision. The discovery came during a random Tuesday morning. Charles had woken up early, his mind already racing with acquisition strategies for a promising tech startup. Victoria was still asleep, her phone charging on the nightstand, screen unlocking briefly as a notification came through. That's when he saw it, the message that would change everything. Most billionaires would have handed this off to private investigators, but Charles believed in handling critical matters personally. He had built his fortune by understanding people's weaknesses and exploiting them at precisely the right moment. This situation would be no different. Within hours he knew everything about James Parker, 35, architectural designer at a prestigious firm, married to Emily Parker, a pharmaceutical executive. Most importantly, James was scheduled to meet Victoria at their beach house that Friday, while Charles was supposedly attending an economic forum in Davos. Charles canceled his conference without telling Victoria. Instead of confronting her immediately, he devised a plan. Unlike typical jealous husbands, he didn't want a screaming match or violent confrontation. No, Charles wanted something far more devastating: the complete psychological dismantling of both his wife and her lover. His first call was to a discreet investigative firm that had helped him vet business competitors for years. Within 24 hours they delivered comprehensive files on both James and his wife Emily. Financial records, work schedules, personal habits, even their marriage therapist's name. Charles studied the material like he would a company he planned to acquire. The next call was more difficult, reaching out to Emily Parker. The conversation was brief, controlled and calculated. Mrs. Parker, we've never met. My name is Charles Westfield. I believe your husband and my wife are having an affair. They're planning to meet at our beach house this Friday. I think we should discuss how to handle this situation. Emily's initial shock quickly transformed into a steely resolve that impressed Charles. She wasn't hysterical or in denial, she was angry and determined. Perfect. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Westfield? She asked after a long pause. A coordinated response. One that ensures they never forget the consequences of their actions. They agreed to meet at a private room in an upscale restaurant the following day. Emily arrived precisely on time, dressed impeccably in a navy suit that signaled she was a formidable person in her own right. Charles immediately recognized why she had risen to an executive position at her company. She carried herself with the same calculated confidence he valued in business partners. Before we discuss anything, Emily said after ordering coffee, I need to know your intentions. Are you planning violence? Because I won't be part of that. Charles smiled slightly. I don't need violence to destroy someone, Mrs. Parker. I never have. Over the next 2 hours they formulated their strategy. It wasn't about emotional outbursts or dramatic confrontations. It was about control, leverage, and creating a scenario where Victoria and James would destroy themselves. They've been careful, Emily noted, scrolling through phone records Charles had obtained. 7 months of this and I never suspected. People having affairs create idealized versions of each other, Charles replied. Our job is to reintroduce reality. Their plan was elegant in its simplicity. They would be waiting at the beach house when Victoria and James arrived. But unlike a typical confrontation, they wouldn't immediately reveal themselves. They would allow the lovers to settle in, become comfortable, perhaps even intimate, and then emerge when they were most vulnerable. Charles had the beach house prepared meticulously, hidden cameras installed in the common areas, nothing in bedrooms or bathrooms as Charles insisted on some ethical boundaries despite his rage. The house was stocked with Victoria's favorite champagne and the specific brand of chocolate-covered strawberries she always claimed were their special treat. Friday arrived with perfect weather, sunny, clear and mild. Charles and Emily arrived at the beach house hours before Victoria and James were expected. The house staff had been given the weekend off, ensuring complete privacy for what was about to unfold. "Are you certain about this?" Emily asked as they positioned themselves in Charles's study, adjacent to the main living area. "Once we do this, there's no going back for any of us." Charles adjusted his watch, a rare vintage Patek Philippe that Victoria had given him on their 10th anniversary. "Some things can't be forgiven, Mrs. Parker. Some betrayals demand consequences." At precisely 6:43 p.m. they heard the electronic gates of the property open. Through the security feed they watched Victoria's Range Rover pull into the circular driveway. She emerged looking radiant in a white summer dress, laughing as James retrieved their bags from the trunk. They kissed passionately before heading toward the front entrance. Charles and Emily listened as the couple entered, their voices echoing through the marble foyer. "I've been thinking about this all week," James said, his voice carrying into the study. "3 whole days of just us. I had the chef prepare and leave your favorites before giving him the weekend off." Victoria replied, "And I picked up that champagne you love. The Krug, you remembered." "Of course. I remember everything about you." Charles felt his jaw tighten. That particular champagne had been a special purchase he'd made after closing a particularly difficult acquisition last year. Victoria had called it too extravagant then. He gave Emily a slight nod and they moved silently toward the main living area. Victoria and James had already opened the champagne and were toasting each other by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. "The view never gets old, does it?" Charles said calmly, stepping into the room. The champagne flute in Victoria's hand crashed to the floor. James froze mid-sip, his face draining of color. "Charles," Victoria whispered, "you're supposed to be in Switzerland." "Davos," he corrected her. "And clearly you're supposed to be at your sister's in Boston." James set his glass down carefully. "Mr. Westfield, I can explain." "Can you?" Emily said, stepping into view beside Charles. "Please do explain, James. I'm particularly interested in hearing how you explained our marriage counseling sessions to Victoria. Did you tell her we were working through issues? Or did you simply paint me as the cold, career-obsessed wife?" The room fell into a heavy silence broken only by the distant sound of waves crashing against the private beach below. "What is this?" Victoria finally managed, looking between Charles and Emily. "How do you know each other?" "We have something in common," Charles replied evenly. "We're married to liars." What unfolded over the next 3 hours was not the screaming match or violent confrontation that might have occurred in a less calculated scenario. Instead, Charles and Emily maintained complete control, systematically dismantling the fantasy world Victoria and James had constructed. Charles revealed the extensive documentation of their affair. Credit card statements showing hotel charges, restaurant receipts, text message logs. Emily calmly explained how James had been skipping their marriage counseling sessions he had insisted on to meet Victoria. "You told me she didn't want children," Victoria said to James at one point, her voice breaking. "You said that's why your marriage was failing." "We've been trying for a baby for 2 years," Emily responded. "I've gone through 3 rounds of IVF. James has known how important this is to us." James couldn't meet either woman's eyes. "It's complicated," he muttered. "No," Charles corrected. "Complicated as restructuring a failing corporation. Complicated as navigating international trade regulations. This is quite simple. You both made choices, repeatedly knowing they would devastate the people who loved you." As the night progressed, Victoria and James gradually moved from denial to anger to desperate justification. They had found in each other what was missing in their marriages, they claimed. They hadn't meant for it to happen. They had planned to end things properly. Charles and Emily listened without visible emotion, which only increased the lovers' distress. There were no dramatic accusations, no thrown objects or threats, just the methodical deconstruction of a relationship built on lies. Near midnight, Charles finally revealed the final component of his plan. "Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. my legal team will arrive here with divorce papers," he informed Victoria. "They include a clause activating the infidelity provisions of our prenuptial agreement." Victoria's face went ashen. "Charles, you can't be serious. That would leave me with almost nothing." "Not nothing," he corrected. "The apartment in Chicago, a settlement of $5 million, and your personal possessions. The rest. The houses, the investment portfolio, your position on the foundation board, those revert to me." "You'd ruin me over one mistake," Victoria whispered. "7 months is not a mistake," Charles replied. "It's a campaign." He turned to James. "As for you, Mr. Parker, I've taken the liberty of informing the partners at your firm about your relationship with Victoria. Given that my company is currently their largest client, financing the Singapore project, they were quite concerned about potential conflicts of interest." James stood abruptly. "You had no right." "I had every right," Charles countered calmly. "Business is about protecting one's interest. Something you might want to consider as you update your resume." Emily had remained quiet during Charles's revelations, but now she spoke directly to her husband. "I won't be pursuing anything as dramatic as Charles. I simply want you out of our home by tomorrow evening. I've already changed the security codes and contacted our attorney." The devastation on James and Victoria's faces wasn't from histrionic emotional outbursts, but from the cold, calculated dismantling of their lives by the very people they had underestimated and betrayed. Charles stood, buttoning his suit jacket with the precision that had become his trademark in boardrooms worldwide. "Emily and I will be leaving now. You're welcome to stay here tonight. Consider it a final night in paradise before reality intrudes." As they prepared to depart, Victoria made one last desperate attempt. "Charles, please. 13 years can't end like this. We can work through this." Charles paused at the doorway, looking back at the woman he had once built his life around. "Indeed, we had 13 years, and it took you 7 months to decide they meant nothing." The aftermath unfolded exactly as Charles had planned. Victoria contested the prenup but ultimately settled for slightly more than the initial offer, still a fraction of what she would have received in a normal divorce. James lost his position at the architectural firm, his professional reputation tarnished by whispers of ethical impropriety. Charles and Emily maintained contact, not as romantic partners but as allies who had weathered a devastating storm together. They occasionally met for coffee, sharing updates on their newly reconstructed lives. 6 months after that night at the beach house, Charles finalized the acquisition of a pharmaceutical company that had been Emily's main competitor. He appointed her as CEO, recognizing in her the same ruthless efficiency and strategic mind that had made him successful. "The beach house was sold. Too many memories," Charles explained to his real estate agent. He purchased instead a modernist cliffside property further up the coast, its clean lines and open spaces reflecting his new unencumbered life. At a charity gala a year later, Charles encountered Victoria for the first time since the divorce. She was on the arm of an aging real estate developer, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "You look well," she said, her voice carrying a hint of the warmth that had once captivated him. "I am well," he replied simply. "Was it worth it, destroying everything we had over one mistake?" Charles considered her question carefully before answering. "I didn't destroy anything, Victoria. I merely revealed what was already broken." As he walked away, Charles felt no triumph, no vindication, only the quiet certainty that in business as in life, every action has consequences. He had simply ensured that those consequences were proportional to the betrayal. The billionaire who had built an empire from nothing had applied those same skills to dismantling a deception, and in doing so he had rebuilt himself stronger, wiser, and free from illusions about love and loyalty in a world where both were increasingly rare commodities.